escalation, Noah pulled out his gun from the holster and fired.
How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
You know I'm here?
Nah.
You know you got a warrant for your arrest, Tyler?
For what?
For failure to appear to court. Shots fired! Shots fired! Sorry, I'm bleeding!
In the blink of an eye, Tyler was lying on the floor with blood pooling around his body. Now, of course, due to community guidelines, we cannot show the full video here. But if you got the stomach for it, you can find the uncensored version of this iceberg on our Patreon. Now, Noah himself was trying to control the bleeding from his neck. He called for help immediately, and both he and Tyler were rushed for treatment. However, only one would survive. And even more unexpected, court documents show that the trio did it out of revenge because of a allegation involving Caleb. The case is still moving in court with no final outcome yet. Level 6. KFC Roadside Ambush. On November 29, 2023, Kelvin Ward had just left a KFC with his teenage son after picking up food and starting their drive home. Now, for a few minutes, everything seemed normal. They were just another car on the road, leaving with their takeaway like anyone else that night. But then, without warning, another vehicle rammed their car multiple times before it eventually stopped. And the moment the two cars came to a halt, everything shifted. The son managed to get out and ran from the scene, escaping into nearby streets. However, the father, Kelvin, stayed behind. And what followed was nothing short of a grueling nightmare. As soon as Kelvin stepped out of the car, he was pulled into a violent confrontation in the road. Almost immediately, the attackers pulled out large knives and machetes and began attacking him. The poor father suffered fatal injuries and was left there on the road as the attackers fled. Emergency services arrived shortly after, but there was nothing they could do, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Later investigations linked the incident to an ongoing dispute involving his son, which had escalated into a coordinated attack that night. So Kelvin had not even been the main target. He was just caught in the crossfire for trying to save his son. That revelation made the loss even more tragic. Eventually, 4 men named Leighton, Tyrone, Aaron, and Rasharn were arrested. In court, 3 were convicted of or manslaughter, while all 4 were found guilty of conspiracy to the son. And the main attackers were sentenced to life behind bars. Rayshard Brooks case. In 2020, a man sleeping in a car at a Wendy's drive-thru ended up at the center of one of the most controversial police cases of that year. And within 24 hours, the restaurant itself was wiped off the face of the earth. On June 12th that year, the Atlanta police got a call about a car blocking a Wendy's drive-thru lane. When officers arrived, they found 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks asleep behind his wheel. Now, at first, the interaction was calm. Body cam footage later showed the officers talking with Rayshard for more than 40 minutes. They laughed with him, asked him questions, and walked him through sobriety tests in the parking lot. But after Rayshard failed the breathalyzer test, the officers' attitude shifted and they moved in to arrest him. However, Rayshard resisted almost immediately, and within seconds, the calm conversation escalated into a violent struggle. During that fight, Rayshard somehow grabbed one of the officers' tasers and broke free. Then he started running through the parking lot. Body cam and surveillance footage showed him turning while he ran and firing the taser back toward the pursuing officers. And right after that, Officer Garrett Rolfe fired his gun. Rayshard was hit twice in the back and collapsed in the parking lot. But that was only the beginning of the fallout. Because only a month before this incident, in May 2020, George Floyd was killed by police officers. So protests on police brutality were already going on all across the states. and this incident only added fuel to the fire, particularly because Richard, too, died from the gunshots. Videos of the encounter spread online while protests reignited across Atlanta. Demonstrators gathered outside the Wendy's the very next night, and the situation eventually escalated into chaos. In fact, the restaurant was set on fire and burned down completely. As for Officer Garrett, who had pulled the trigger, the aftermath was just as brutal. He was fired from the police department while his partner on call was placed on administrative duty. The evidence presented in court showed Garrett brutalizing Richard, so initially he was charged with murder. However, years later, a special prosecutor ruled that the firing was legally justified, claiming Richard fired the taser first. Even now, the case remains one of the defining incidents of 2020, not just because of the incident itself, but because of everything that happened after it. McDonald's missing order. Now, up to this point, we have already seen how bad missing food complaints can get. But this case went beyond my wildest imagination. It happened on December 27, 2023, during the afternoon rush at McDonald's near Abernathy Boulevard. A 19-year-old named Tania Evans came into the restaurant claiming that part of their drive-thru order was missing. She argued with employees behind the counter while customers nearby continued eating. But the discussion kept getting louder. More people started paying attention, workers were trying to defuse the situation when another customer stepped in. Her name was Tamanika Woods, a 30-year-old mother of four who reportedly knew one of the employees. She tried to defend the worker during the argument, but almost immediately, the discord wasn't about food anymore. Soon, yelling turned into pushing, and within seconds, people inside realized the situation was getting out of control. And in the middle of the riot, Tania took out a gun and fired. In an instant, the entire joint erupted in panic. Tamanika collapsed after being hit in the chest. 911 was called while some frantic customers rushed in to try to help the victim. Meanwhile, Tania was immediately restrained from leaving the site until police arrived. Tamanika was transported to the hospital in critical condition, but sadly later died from her injuries. Investigators reviewed the surveillance footage and concluded the only person responsible for the whole fiasco was Tania Evans. So she was later charged with homicide and other firearm-related offenses. Eventually, she accepted a plea deal and in 2024 received a 25-year prison sentence. The Burger King Trap. A crowded Burger King in Delhi became the setting of one of the most coordinated attacks the city has ever seen. It happened on June 18, 2024, around 9:41 p.m. at a Burger King in Rajuri Garden. Aman June was sitting near the dining area with a woman beside him. And then, two men entered the restaurant separately and quietly settled behind the couple. For several minutes, they seemed like random customers waiting for food. But then the men suddenly stood up and pulled out pistols, and they opened fire directly at Aman. The first shots hit him in the back, and the reaction inside the restaurant was immediate. People dropped to the floor or ran toward exits as gunfire continued inside the packed outlet. Aman tried to move away from the table and made it toward the billing counter, but the attackers followed him. The firing didn't stop during the chase. It continued across different parts of the restaurant, including the counter area where one of the gunmen had climbed up. Within less than a minute, around 38 to 40 rounds had been fired from multiple weapons. Aman collapsed inside the restaurant. However, while he was fighting for his life, the woman who had been sitting with him was seen simply walking out amidst the chaos rather than running or reacting like the others. She was identified as Anu, and her behavior became a key focus for investigators. As police reconstructed the sequence from CCTV and witness accounts, the attack appeared structured rather than spontaneous. Now, Aman, unfortunately, died at the scene, but his death led police into the darkest corners of Delhi's organized crime networks. The incident was believed to be the result of a gang rivalry linked to fugitive gangster Himanshu Bau. In fact, Himanshu even claimed responsibility for the attack and called it a retaliation for an earlier homicide. Later, Delhi police claimed to have executed the main suspect in a police firing. Still, how Anu came into the equation was still unknown, until she was caught fleeing to Nepal. Once she was taken into custody, all the pieces immediately fell into place. As it turns out, Anu was the bait. She had lured Aman to the location under the guise of a friendship, and once her job was done there, she simply walked out. So far, she has been remanded to judicial custody. Level 7. The Drive-Thru Witness. On July 10, 2025, a masked woman entered a McDonald's through the rear entrance and walked straight into the employee area. Within moments, she confronted the shift manager, Jennifer Harris, and pulled a knife from under her arm. Without any warning, she began stabbing Jennifer repeatedly. Now, inside the restaurant, people froze as the attack unfolded in front of them. For a few seconds, no one reacted until eventually a gunshot broke the silence. A customer in the drive-thru had witnessed the attack and fired a warning shot in an attempt to stop it. But that intervention didn't end the attack immediately. But the same customer then held the suspect at gunpoint until police arrived. The victim, Jennifer, was rushed to the hospital while the attacker was taken into custody. But things took a turn when the officers removed the culprit's mask. It was Afeni Muhammad, another employee at the same McDonald's. In fact, she had been working under Jennifer for quite a while. Turns out, earlier that same day, Jennifer and Afeni had gotten into an argument. It escalated to a point that Jennifer had to send Afeni home. And Afeni did comply with her order, but not before warning that she would be back.
I got sent home early yesterday. I got sent home early today by the same person. I'm telling you, she's a bully. This isn't funny. She needs to understand that just because she's a mother and got children doesn't mean that she can come in this store, disrespecting people, talking to them like everybody's beneath her. She has no respect.
That's exactly what she was doing there, armed and masked. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors determined Jennifer had been stabbed 23 times, which proved fatal, as she died shortly after. Consequently, Afeni was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and weapons-related offenses. Prosecutors argued that the return to the restaurant with a mask and weapon showed clear intent. In later proceedings, video evidence from inside the restaurant was presented, and the case continued toward trial. Trapped at Taco Bell. It all started with a drive-thru lane that didn't move the way it should have. 25-year-old Megan Kellerman was waiting alone in a single-lane Taco Bell drive-thru in Stowe, Ohio on August 14, 2024. In the car behind her was 53-year-old Jason Williams, who suddenly began honking aggressively. The situation got worse when he proceeded to hit her vehicle from behind. Megan was effectively boxed in with no clear way to pull out or escape. Feeling unsafe, she called her father during the situation and also asked staff to contact 911. Inside the lane, traffic was blocked and the narrow layout left her stuck in place while tensions grew outside her car. Moments later, Jason got out of his vehicle. He walked toward Megan's window with a handgun and fired at close range. She was hit multiple times, including a fatal shot to the neck. After the firing, Jason returned to his car and pulled an unexpected move. He aimed the gun at himself and pulled the trigger. Within minutes, the Taco Bell drive-thru had turned into a gruesome crime scene. When authorities arrived at the scene, both the gunman and the victim were pronounced dead. Police later confirmed that the two did not know each other, so the entire incident was treated as a sudden escalation of road rage that turned violent. Investigators also reviewed Jason's background, and it turns out he was already a walking red flag. He had prior arrests, including alcohol-related offenses and a DUI earlier in 2024, where he was found with a loaded firearm. In fact, at the time of the incident, he had been released on bond. Whereas Megan Kellerman had a shining career ahead of her. She had recently completed her MBA from Cleveland State University. But unfortunately, her story was cut short by a man who couldn't handle a normal situation. The investigation officially closed, but questions about single-lane drive-through designs and incident prevention persisted. Why? Why would he do that to the, I know she's the person right in front of him. It's not her fault the drive-through is going slow. I feel so terrible for her, and I feel not 1 ounce of sympathy for this angry, disturbed man. The fast food alibi. 20-year-old James Tier was outside on Goosemore Lane in Erdington playing football with friends when a black BMW pulled onto the street, and soon the situation turned deadly. Inside that car were 2 men, and they called James over to the driver's side window. But the moment James approached it, a shotgun was fired at close range. In a blink, James was struck and collapsed on the road. Intending to flee, the 2 men quickly drove off, leaving James where he fell. Soon, emergency services were called, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. James had died at the scene. The investigation began quickly, and the same 2 men were captured on CCTV inside a nearby fast food restaurant about 20 minutes away. But what stood out to investigators most was their behavior. Despite what had just happened, they appeared calm, ordering their food and conversing casually. One of them did have a visible injury to his lip, which the police believed came from the shotgun recoil, and that small detail would become a major part of the case. By the next morning, police found the stolen BMW abandoned in Small Heath. Inside, they found a blood-stained tissue. That tissue was tested, and the DNA came back to Ty Blake. From there, detectives began piecing together the BMW's route using CCTV, tracking its movements from Erdington toward the other suspect's home, Sharn Miles. They also found that the car had been stolen from Leicester earlier that same day, and phone evidence placed mobiles linked to Miles and Blake near the burglary location. As the investigation widened, the motive started to become clearer. The firing incident was not random. A week earlier, Miles had been involved in an altercation with men at a Birmingham nightclub. And strangely, James wasn't even the main person involved in that dispute, but he was connected to the wider group. According to police, Miles and Blake had intended to cause serious harm to someone linked to that group. James was simply the first person they came across. With evidence building, both men were arrested and charged. During the trial at Birmingham Crown Court, each of them admitted being present in the car but blamed the other for firing the shot. The jury rejected both versions of events and found them guilty of. In the final hearing, the judge sentenced both Miles and Blake to life imprisonment. Killer Grandpa. If you saw this man sitting inside a McDonald's with 4 children around him, you'd probably think it's a wholesome family moment. Maybe a grandfather taking his grandkids out for food. But what those children didn't know was that only a short time earlier, both of their parents had been killed. The man was 67-year-old Derek Martin. He was the former stepfather of 30-year-old Chloe Bashford. Earlier that same day, Chloe had spent part of the morning with him inside her home in New Haven. But at some point inside the house, the conversation turned to money. And that was when the situation turned into a nightmare. Something in Derek flipped as he attacked Chloe with a hammer and knife. There was no time for her to escape, and the situation only got worse. Minutes later, her husband, 33-year-old Josh Bashford, arrived home. He walked into the aftermath without knowing what had already happened, and as soon as he entered, Derek turned on him too. Josh was chased upstairs, stabbed, and then strangled during the struggle. Both Chloe and Josh were killed inside their own home. And after the killings, Derek changed his clothes inside the house, and then he left and picked up the couple's 4 children from school. Instead of fleeing or hiding, he took them out for food, making stops at Costa and McDonald's, and behaved normally in public. CCTV footage later confirmed he appeared calm throughout, and after spending time with the kids...
What's that from? A knife. Have you got a knife on you? Right, so do you want to stand up for us? The time is now 7:12, okay? You're under arrest on the suspicion of murder ×2. You don't have to say anything, however may harm defence if you do not mention when questioned, and then we should later align in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The reason for this is that you've stated you've murdered 2 people. Officers have attended your address and have found 2 bodies, okay? Necessity is for your arrest for a prompt and effective investigation by means of special warnings and a recorded interview, okay, and to prevent any further harm and your loss. You understand all that? Okay.
The investigation confirmed the trigger was a dispute over money, but the sequence of actions that followed showed a level of control that shocked investigators and the public.
First hit Chloe with a sledgehammer on the head.
In court, the defense raised mental health arguments, but the jury rejected a diminished responsibility verdict. Derek was convicted of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 29 years. Now, these were disturbing cases about fast food, but the internet is filled with far more horrifying cases. Don't believe me? Well, check out our video on the most disturbing things on the internet iceberg. Oh, and also, this video does not end here. There is an exclusive and uncensored level 8 that you can access on our Patreon. Link in the description.